Hi, Joe Cerrone.
And Alan Rosette.
Welcome to CAD 117, Intermediate AutoCAD, in our second Zoom classroom meeting. Alrighty, so here we are in D2L Core Shell, and we've released the instructions for Module 2 in the main splash page, which is multi-view drawing and 3D modeling. And so here's the drawing exercises. And so we're going to be working on these. They're just widgets, just geometry shapes that will create the views of in something called multi-view drawing or orthographic drawing. And so the chapter goes and talks about the standardization of views and how we create drawings for engineering and architectural applications. We'll go through and model the parts. There is a multi-view grid sheet that you'll download to use for the drawing, and so you'll click on this download and you'll open that, and you'll be in AutoCAD, and we will use this multi-view grid sheet. And what we will do, let's see if I can undo that. And then we have the two-dimensional drawings, which will look like this essentially. And so we'll create the two-dimensional geometry on the grid, front view, top view, right side view, and this will be like hidden lines, which are shown when we're looking at it from the right side. Objects that you don't see the geometry itself are represented with hidden lines. And so this is a tube, and then to represent that it's a tube, that it's hollow, in the top view we'll use hidden lines, or these dashed lines, to represent that there's an interior feature there. And then we use center lines to communicate axes of symmetry. And so as we go through and create these different drawings, we'll create those drawings. And then we'll model them. And so we've also got some applications where we'll show how to create the models of these different components. And what I did was I created a layout with the different perspectives for those drawings. Alrighty. Take a look at the calendar to stay on task. And so as we're going through, module 1 was due on Sunday at 11:59, and so that was our exercise where we created one of these two drawing lab 1A and 1B. And then 1C is bonus, and some of the students have asked for some instructions on that. We might have a YouTube video. I'll go take a look at the Oakton CAD YouTube site and see if we have something that'll show how to model that.
We did it one time.
I believe we do. Yeah, I just have to find it and post it. And so, but that's a bonus exercise, so it's not required, but it is an interesting project, especially when you get into 3D modeling and such. And so one of the students asked about how to model the part, and so I put in the announcement bonus video, and so here's how to add a 3D viewport to the model. And so if I click on that,
How to create a viewport.
and I'll turn off the sound so I can voice over it. And so creating the 2D geometry. And AutoCAD is a great program for 3D modeling, but it's essentially built off of a 2D platform and then has these modeling tools. So there are more intelligent programs, but AutoCAD is a great value, and it's the most used CAD software. And so I go through and I just demonstrate how to use the press pull command here. And so we drew a second one of it, and then I rotated it, placed it on the title block, and added a viewport, and then converted the viewport. So if you're interested, now it's not required, but we have a lot of students that are interested in the modeling, and so for your further CAD development. You can add the 3D model. It's bonus though, because we're just getting started with that. So continuing, Module 2 has been assigned. Module 1, if we go and we look at the content area, was to create these two drawings. The videos are for that, and then there's the lecture material. Moving to Module 2. In Module 2 we have these drawings, and they're from the end of the textbook, and so the textbook that we're using is the Technical Drawing 101 textbook, and then we're working on Chapter 2, Multi-View Drawing. And if we look at the learning objectives for this, what we want to do is understand the technical aspect of technical drawing. And so how do you create the views? Where are they defined? And how does the geometry describe those? And so this is a very good chapter if you have not had any technical drawing experience or training, so that you understand what needs to be on a drawing and how these standards by ASME, okay, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, defines what's on a drawing, line weights, and how drawings are represented. And so if we look through this chapter, we have information for it. What we're looking at is, and I'm sorry, my internet connection can be a little wonky here, these standards and conventions for how to create these views, and they use what's called a glass box. And so here's our 3D model, and then here's the front view. If we were to look at it from the front, here's what it would look like from the side, and here's what it would look like from the top, because multi-view drawing has been around before computers, and so drafting was a manual process that you had to represent 3D objects on paper, 2D, and this is the method for doing that. And so as we go through and we look at the terminology, we tie that into the coordinate system. Here's our user coordinate system. And then we talk about what a drawing looks like and how you would go about laying that out. And so we talk a little bit about geometry, tangency, and relationships for the geometry that we're drawing. And what's nice about drawing it on CAD is that you can understand it. So when you look at this, you say, oh, that's a cylinder, I can work with that. The instructor goes through how to represent views by showing a bus and showing the front of the bus, the front view, and then how they would be detailed, or how the views would be laid out using orthographic drawing techniques. So that's the textbook, and it also goes through architectural applications, because the book is great. It does both mechanical and architectural work, and so it's a little heavy on the mechanical aspect, as the drawings are better or easier to explain, things like inclined views and normal surfaces and projection. And a lot of these are not as modern as they used to be. People don't draw with a pencil so much anymore, because you can model it with CAD and then generate the two-dimensional views. But still, there's a very strong vocational component to being able to understand how these drawings are created and how things like oblique surfaces look in 2D. And so the textbook does a great job of explaining that information. And then when we get down to the drawings themselves, we've created these slides that go through the PowerPoints, and then we have a lab here how to do the drawings. And so if we click on this web page, this is in an older D2L format, but it does go through how to create the geometry for that. So we'll set up the grid and the snap, and then we'll go through and we'll draw those different objects. And the author has updated the end of the chapter exercises, and so this is still a good exercise, but there's some additional new ones, and I've put them in as bonus. And so this is how to draw the first lab, And then if we come back here to module 2, here's our PowerPoint, and then here's the drawings. And so again, the lecture and the PowerPoint explains how to lay out those different aspects, and then at the end of the PowerPoint we have additional assignments in theory on modeling. And it's quite long, so I'm not going to go into all of that at this point. And so here's the module exercises. And I've created, these are the bonus exercises. So if you've done the first exercise and you want to practice your modeling and do more, here's some additional assignments. And I'll try to cut some YouTube videos for that. At this time I am swamped with a number of other activities. Alright, so the module 2 is to create the two-dimensional geometry, the front, top, and right side view. Be sure to use the correct line types and line weights. And so as we look at the drawing, you'll create the front, top, and right side view. And then, be sure to use the correct line types. And so you can see I have center lines here. And if I look at this in model space, sometimes the line types look a little wonky depending on the graphics card. You can see the hidden lines are better dashed in model space, and it's something called PSLT scale that controls the line type and the line dashes. But as we go through it, you'll create the front view, the right side view, and the top view, and then you'll use the layers to do that. And so we'll use the hidden line layer to create the hidden lines. And then we'll use the visible line layer to create the visible lines. And everything is set for grid and snap. And so if you go to the tools and you look at the drafting settings, you want your snap to be on, your polar tracking to be enabled. You don't need your grid on because we have this grid that's kind of built into this, and it would be a double grid. And so polar tracking is enabled. O-snap isn't really necessary on this exercise, and so you can turn off the O-snap. And then as we were to create this, if I were to just trace over it, let's say with that line, you would basically just go and you would snap to the increments. And as you move the cursor, you can see the measurements that are created for that. And that ties into the drawing exercise, the PDF in D2L. And so we'll create the object lines. And then you would switch over to the hidden line layer. And if I use a different color for that, hidden lines would be represented like this. And then for some reason everybody seems to leave off center lines for some reason. And so when you create the annotation for center marks, what center marks do is they convey that something is round. And so when we create this, if I can get it, there we go. On the annotate tab, we would use the center mark creator. And I don't know if I'm on the right layer, but I can always update it to the right layer. And so use center lines to communicate concentricity and roundness. And then what we're doing is we're modeling these. And so to model them, it's kind of fun. We'll be doing that in next week's version of the video. And so what we do is we copy the two-dimensional geometry, and I just put it out in model space, and so just far enough away from it like that. And then I would take an isometric view, and then we would use some of our modeling tools. Now as we start working with modeling, you want to keep things at 90-degree angles, because once they get a little bit off perpendicularity, it's hard to calculate the sizes of things. But essentially we could just switch over to a three-dimensional workspace. And then I like to use a 3D layer, and so on the layers I created a layer for 3D. And then you can use a number of different tools. You can use extrude or you can use press pull, and you would get the dimensions for the thickness. This is 4 units. If I click on that, see if I can get it. No, it doesn't seem to want to cooperate with it. But as we go through and we work with it, we could use press pull. And I'm going to change this to a, and that's probably why, to a conceptual. Sometimes the video card will give you areas of difficulty. And so I'll say that's going to be 4 units. And then I like to use the 3D rotate button to get them in the proper perspective. And so I'll create that rotation. Grab the hoop, drive it with polar, hit escape, and then I'll move it off of the ghost. And we do have a video that shows how to create these different three-dimensional models, and then that'll be our next week assignment. You're welcome to work ahead. There's a lot of great content in this exercise. There is bonus material, and so there's a lot of things if you just want to model the parts. And I recommend it very much. Go through some of these module 2 exercises and work on modeling them. And if you have a problem, just submit it in D2L and say, hey, can you show me how to do this technique? And I'll see if I can drop off a quick video for you on some of those modeling techniques. Alrighty, back to the module 2. Okay, so our exercise is to read through Technical Drawing 101, Multi-View Drawing. It's a pretty in-depth chapter on multi-view drawing and how they're created in the standards. And then the assignment is to create the two-dimensional drawing, front view, top view, and right side of each one of these parts right here using the multi-view grid sheet. So you download the grid sheet, and then you open the file, and you'll have the grid sheet template. And then what you would do is you would go back here, and here's the exercise. And so you can put this on your second screen, or you can just download it. And you just count squares to figure out how to orientate it. The arrow shows the front view direction of sight to get everybody started with that. Alright, back to module 2. So read the chapter, create the two-dimensional views, front, top, and right side view using the multi-view grid sheet. Watch the videos for how to create that if you need that additional help. And then there's some additional PowerPoints on Introduction to 3D and how to create 3D models from 2D drawings. And so this information goes through how to do some of the modeling. And I pulled some other resources. We used a different textbook before and I kind of liked it, but they discontinued it. And so I'll go through and I'll show how to create the models for each of these individual parts, which according to the student pre-test introduction, a lot of people are interested in that part, and we'll work with you to get those components in your set of skills, but it takes a little time to develop them. So we'll start with the 2D. If you look at the assignments, Module 2, Part 1 is just the 2D, is due October 6th, and then we've given you another week. Oh, I'm sorry, we have the Part 3, the second part, also due with the 3D on October 6th. So we have until Friday, and we'll probably extend this out, Al, till I'm putting them due. We'll have that in D2L. Typically we'll have those due on the weekend. But let's just leave it at this point for October 6th. Back to the main splash page. Module 2. If you need additional support or additional help, we have additional help. Just request a time. We're in the Skokie campus on Wednesday from 9 a.m. until 12 in room P130. And you can also book virtual meetings on Thursday morning. Just send us an email. With that, I'm going to stop the recording and open things up for questions. Al, is there anything else that I need to cover before I stop the meeting that you can think of?
No, that's it.
Alrighty, sounds good. I'm going to stop the recording and open things up for questions.